There's no such thing as being patient in Dynasty anymore. Every new piece of data that we find gets baked into a player's price, and that price changes day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. So 3 weeks into the NFL season, I think it's a good time to actually go and look at what these rookies have been doing and see, are they living up to what we expected? Are they not? And if so, are there reasons for that? I think we need to be adjusting our ranks, updating our priors on these rookies based on what we've seen from them in the NFL so far. So that's what we're gonna do today. My name is Paul. This is Pure Potential. Let's get into it. Before we go any further, it's time for another giveaway. This time, Fantasy Points has graciously agreed to give away two, not one, two Fantasy Points data suites to you wonderful viewers. Now, I used the Fantasy Points data suite to compile most of the data that I'm going to use in this video. It's an incredible resource. And like I said, two of these are going to two of you. And all you have to do to be eligible to win is subscribe to this channel, which I'm sure you were going to do already. Subscribe to the Fantasy Points YouTube channel. So I'll put a link to that in the description and you can go subscribe to Fantasy Points. And then finally, third thing, very important, you do have to join the Pure Potential Discord. Now, this is totally free. It's free to make an account on Discord. It's free to join the Discord. That link is also in the description, but I'm gonna be doing the giveaway within the Discord. So you will not see an announcement about the winners in a video. I will be announcing the winners in Discord. So you do have to go ahead and join. So if you're interested in this giveaway, I will be announcing the winners next Wednesday on October 2nd. All right, let's get into the video here. I'm gonna be doing something a little bit different today. I'm actually sitting at my computer for the first time for one of these videos. It's not just like over here to the right. I rearranged the whole studio so I could do that. And it's going to make it a lot easier to do things like what I'm doing today, which is making a tier list. So as we re-rank these rookies from the 2024 class, I'm going to go ahead and sort them into tiers based on what I see their trade value as moving forward. And I have that trade value in the form of base picks, which I did explain in my video why rookie picks are the most important assets in Dynasty. So if you want to check out that video, that's over in the Dynasty strategy playlist. But basically, Jacob Sanderson came up with this idea of a draft pick in a vacuum. So a draft pick that is equally likely to be any of the 12 slots. And it's really more of a hypothetical thing since no actual first round pick is perfectly likely to be anywhere on the spectrum. But it's kind of a good standardized unit of measure that you can use to give each player a trade value. And that's what I have in my Pure Potential Dynasty rankings, which is what I'm pulling from to get these rookie values today. So that's that. We're going to go ahead and start sorting these rookies into tiers. And just know that I'm doing this based on a Superflex, PPR, tight end premium format. This would obviously look much, much different in a one quarterback Dynasty league. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this and we'll start out with the top tier. These are players that I think are currently worth 2 to 3 base first. And I actually view this group as like two smaller tiers within one, but just so it all fits nicely on the screen, I'm gonna combine them together. So we're gonna go in descending order here, and I'm gonna start with the player that I would take 101 if there was a rookie draft happening today, and that's Malik Nabers. I mean, what he has done so far has been absolutely historic. I was already in love with his prospect profile. I thought he was on par with Marvin Harrison. I had them back to back, and I just kind of deferred to Marvin Harrison in my ranks just because I thought the Dynasty market would kind of defer to him from a value perspective. And they certainly did over the offseason. But with what Nabers has done so far, I feel totally comfortable flipping the two. He's having like the Odell Beckham, Justin Jefferson type of rookie season that you want to see. And he's doing it with Daniel Jones. So I actually put together this chart of wide receiver production that shows all of the rookies I'm going to talk about today and how they rank in a lot of key metrics. What percentage of the routes are they running? What's their targets per out run, their yards per out run, their PFF grade, and their fantasy points per game to this point. And you can just see how Nabers is lapping the field right now. Over 22 points per game. Not necessarily sustainable, but absolutely incredible there. 80 PFF grade, that's kind of a key number actually for rookie wide receivers that is a great indicator of future success. Not that we necessarily have any concerns about Malik Nabers' future success, but that's a good indication. 2.49 yards per out run, absolutely elite. And then 0.34 targets per out run. That's actually third among all wide receivers this season behind Cooper Kupp and Rashee Rice. So not just rookie wide receivers, he is playing like one of the absolute best, most dominant wide receivers in the NFL right now. I think he is easily a top 12 startup pick. I think he's arguably in the top 6 at this point. So I'm very, very high on Malik Nabers. And then coming up behind him, kind of a surprise addition after the Monday night game, which was last night at the time of this recording. And that's Jaden Daniels. I had some skepticism about Jaden Daniels coming in. I mean, I still had him ranked quite high. He was my 4th ranked rookie because the rushing upside was there. He had the draft capital. So I was obviously high on him, generally speaking, but I had some skepticism with him being a 5th-year breakout at quarterback, kind of an older prospect coming in. We don't have a ton of those success stories across the league, but I mean, he has just been so on point these first few weeks, especially in week 3, when they finally kind of unleashed him, let him take some shots downfield. He looked phenomenal on that deep touchdown to Terry McLaurin. He was converting 3rd downs with his legs. He is so elusive, and we all expected him to be a good rusher, right? To be a scrambler, but the rushing has really been there for the first 3 games. He's had double-digit attempts in all 3 of those games, got to at least 39 rushing yards in all 3 of those games, and he's scored a total of 3 rushing touchdowns so far in these first 3 weeks. And the mobility is huge for him because you look around the league at the pocket passers, they're really not separating themselves from the field. You know, you look at CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, those quarterbacks, they're not adding anything. They're not giving you anything that you're not already getting from Baker Mayfield or Derek Carr or Sam Darnold or whoever. So in just the current defensive meta, the way that these defenses are playing, we're not seeing the pocket passers get to the insane volume or the insane efficiency that some of these top guys have been able to do in the past. And I don't know how long that's going to last. These things are going to change. It's very fluid. But right now, what we know is that Jaden Daniels looks like a capable passer, and he is also one of the few quarterbacks that is truly adding a ton of value with his legs. Right there with Malik Neighbors, 1st-round startup pick in my eyes. And then rounding out this tier would be Marvin Harrison, who had a concerning first game, but he was the consensus wide receiver 1 in this class for a reason. He has one of the better prospect profiles we've ever seen for a college wide receiver coming to the pros, top 5 pick in the draft. And after that first game, you know, weeks 2 and week 3, he has totally evaporated any concerns that I or anyone else might have had. 32% of the targets in weeks 2 and week 3, 2.62 yards per route run. He's been truly elite over those past 2 games, and I think that's what we should expect to see more of moving forward. Kyler Murray hasn't been perfect, but he's certainly a serviceable quarterback. Like, you know that Marvin Harrison has a pretty secure situation moving forward. So lots of reasons to be optimistic about him. Super duper young. And I'm moving him up into that top 12 as well. I just think some of these quarterbacks need to drop down, and that opens up space for Neighbors and Daniels and Harrison to get in there. Now, just for comparison's sake, other players I have in this type of value range would be like Kyler Murray and Jamar Chase. Those types of guys. So kind of your second half of the first round, it's like these rookies, Jamar Chase, Kyler Murray. And then after those top 3, I've got a little mini tier break. And then I've got 2 more guys that are closer to 2 base first, I would say, in more of a range with like Nico Collins, Rashee Rice, Justin Herbert, those type of guys. And the first would be our previous consensus 101, Caleb Williams, who just hasn't really looked the part these first few weeks. Definitely some things to be encouraged about, but he has not hit the ground running the way you'd expect. And a lot of that, I think, is on Shane Waldron. This offense is just not well designed. They're not using their best players correctly. They are using players that, frankly, shouldn't be used, like DeAndre Swift and Gerald Everett. It's just a bad offensive design. And that is certainly hampering Caleb's development. But that's the hand he's been dealt, right? Keenan Allen's been hurt. The offense is stale and uninventive. So that's a problem for Caleb. But the other problem is that he just doesn't add value with his legs the same way that Jaden Daniels does. So for him to actually hit that same kind of difference-making ceiling, he needs to be so elite as a passer. He would really need to be like that Patrick Mahomes level passer to truly provide that difference-making production that you want out of a top 12 startup pick. And it's just such a harder path for him than it is for Daniels, who can give you 40 yards and a touchdown on the ground every week. So I do have him a tier below those guys. I'm so happy to trade Caleb plus for Jaden Daniels at this point, and I don't even know how much longer you'll be able to do that in leagues, but that's where it sits for me right now. And then close behind Caleb, like I said, this is tight end premium. Close behind Caleb is going to be Brock Bowers. All of the tight ends this year suck, like basically all of them. Trey McBride has had good peripheral numbers, hasn't come through with like a huge performance yet, but I'm not too worried about him. But outside of McBride, Brock Bowers has really been the only tight end to flash that high end potential that we want to see. Very high target shares in week 1 and week 2. He's not running all of the routes yet, but he's running enough of them where you know he's a weekly starter. He just looks the part. He's everything that I thought his prospect profile would lead him to be. And the fact that the rest of the tight end landscape suddenly looks so murky, with Kelsey looking a little bit washed, Mark Andrews doing his weird disappearing act, Kyle Pitts not really taking a step forward, Dalton Kincaid splitting routes with Dawson Knox, Sam Laporta getting kind of alphaed by Jameson Williams. There's just so many question marks with all these other tight ends that I do think it actually elevates Brock Bowers' value a little bit more, because you're starting to look at like an actual advantage at the tight end position. All right, so that's going to do it for the 2 to 3 base first tier. And then moving on to the 1.5 base first tier, there's two guys that I think are a cut above the rest of these rookies. And the first one is going to be Drake May. Now, we haven't seen Drake May play yet outside of a couple of series at the end of that blowout game against the Jets. So we don't really know what May can do on the field. I was just very high on him as a prospect. I've touted him on this channel already. I don't need to belabor the point with him, but he has mobility. More so than Caleb, I think, just based on what he did in college as a rusher. I think you can expect more from him on the ground. And he has that draft pedigree. So for me, that's enough to keep him valued above, your typical base first. I think he's a guy you want to be rolling the dice on. And we're hopefully going to find out here within the next few weeks what Drake May has, because I don't think that the Patriots are going to withstand too many more embarrassing losses with Jacoby Brissett at the helm before they turn to Drake May. Now, the downside is that the Patriots' offensive line is abysmal. Jalen Polk hasn't really done anything to establish himself. The other weapons are underwhelming. They're designing screens for Austin Hooper in the year 2024. So I don't know what we're going to see from May in his rookie season. It could be a little bit ugly. I'm not sure. But if it doesn't look ugly, if he comes out and he hits the ground running the way Jaden Daniels has, no pun intended there, then it's going to be to the moon. So I think this is a good compromise position on Drake May. And then we're going to go with the other of the big 3 wide receivers from this class. For me, it was always a big 2 and then a little bit of a drop off, but Rome Odunze certainly deserves to be in this tier by himself. I think he is a cut above the other wide receivers that are going to come up in the next tier. He really came on in week 3 after a slow start to the season. He put up 11 targets, caught 6 of those for 112 yards and a touchdown. And he just looked really, really good. I think he was hampered a little bit by that knee injury he was dealing with in week 2. He ran a lot of empty calorie routes where he wasn't really getting the ball. And I don't know, maybe he was kind of a decoy, but in week 3, he was a focal point. I think he was arguably the best wide receiver on the field. And I think that is a sign of good things to come. And then in terms of other players in this tier, I think guys like Dak Prescott belong in this range, and then other wide receivers like Chris Olave and Drake London, where there is some promise, there is some potential upside, but we haven't necessarily seen them go nuclear yet. They're probably a little more productive in the short term than Rome on a week-to-week basis, where Rome has that long-term value upside if him and Caleb can both get this figured out and be a little bit more consistent down the stretch. All right, I'm going to try to keep this moving pretty quickly for the rest of the video because I'm realizing I have a lot of guys to get through. Moving into this next tier, the base 1 tier, I've got 3 wide receivers in this group, and I'm just going to add them all in at the same time, and then we'll go ahead and talk about them. So it's going to be Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy, and Ladd McConkey. And that is the order for me of how I have them ranked. And then I'm just going to pull this back up so we can look at what they're doing relative to the other rookie wide receivers that we've seen. So I have Thomas first out of this group. I think he's just been the most impressive. He's got the highest yards per out run of these 3, despite having some legitimate competition. I know Worthy does have some serious competition as well in Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce. Ladd McConkey, on the other hand, he's been really efficient in his own right, especially high targets per out run. But you do have to compare the situations where McConkey's been in a lower volume passing game, and he's also competing with Quentin Johnston and basically nothing else for targets. Whereas you look at Brian Thomas, he's competing with Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis and Travis Etienne of the backfield. Like these are legitimate receiving talents, not elite guys, but guys that do earn targets at an NFL level. So I think it's been pretty impressive what his role has been so far. And then you get to Xavier Worthy. He had that big week 1 with the 2 touchdowns. He hasn't done a whole lot since. And honestly, the way that I have him ranked here, it's largely a market-based take where I just think that the Dynasty community at large wants Xavier Worthy to be a thing so bad that whenever we get these flashes, whenever we get these big blow-up games, I think you're going to immediately have opportunities if you want to pivot from him into a high-end asset, right? So with Ladd McConkey, I actually think he's been more impressive, like overall, just how he's earned targets, but he hasn't been flashy because the offense hasn't been that productive as a whole. And I don't think that the community, like your average Dynasty manager, is going to get as excited about Ladd McConkey, even coming off of like a 20-point game where you're going to have that flexibility in a trade. So that's why I have Worthy ahead right now. I do think he's going to have a lot of potential to grow in this role. He's getting schemed usage. He does look good when the ball is in his hands. And then just circling back to Ladd here for a second, his 0.3 targets per out run, that's the second best mark amongst all rookie wide receivers through these 3 games. 1.95 yards per out run, also very respectable. And he has the second highest PFF grade, just slightly edging out Marvin Harrison. I don't expect that to hold, but he has been very solid so far. And it's just mostly been muted by these game scripts the Chargers have been in, Justin Herbert getting injured, a lot of runs. But I do think he's a really good player and kind of an underrated buy right now. All right, moving on to the late 1 tier, which is where I have players like DJ Moore and Jaden Reed ranked. I think there's 2 rookies that belong in this group. And the first one is JJ McCarthy, who I think is probably the best buy for any rebuilding dynasty team right now. I mean, how can you watch what Sam Darnold's doing for the Vikings right now and not get extremely excited about JJ McCarthy in this same offense? It's just such a quarterback friendly system. It doesn't even matter that Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson are out. They just keep on rolling. I don't know if that's just the Justin Jefferson effect. I tend to think that Kevin O'Connell's a very, very sharp offensive mind in the same vein as a Kyle Shanahan. So I'm really excited to see McCarthy in this offense. And I think he's just such a safe bet to gain a lot of value between now and the first week of next season. And then the other guy is Jonathan Brooks, who's basically held this exact same value since he was drafted. I thought he was worth a late first in the rookie draft. Nothing has really changed about his timeline or anything. Like, I always thought he would miss some games and then he would get in. He would be eased in next to Chuba Hubbard and eventually take on a large role down the stretch. That's still how I see this playing out. If anything, Andy Dalton's play in week 3 has made it a little bit of a stronger bet where like this offense should be competent moving forward. And that's good for Jonathan Brooks. That's good for the team's red zone trips and expected fantasy points. So I'm excited to see Brooks. I just can't get too excited until we actually see how healthy he is and what he's actually going to be able to do in 2024. And now onto the early second tier, which is where I tend to put a lot of veteran players that are giving you that above replacement level production, but are also kind of precarious due to injury risk or age concerns. So guys like Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, Alvin Kamara. If you're not looking to roster those older players or you have extra ones, you can try to pivot into some of these rookies. One of those guys would be Bo Nix, who I was just about ready to throw the towel in on after the first couple of weeks, showed a lot of promise in week 3, finally made that Sean Payton offense look somewhat functional. And he was also mobile, right? He was the leading rusher for the team, I think. He added a rushing touchdown. That's an element to his game that he did have in college. I wasn't sure how it would translate to the pros, but if he's going to run like that, that's another big boost to his value. And I could actually see him jumping up into that late 1 tier if he can string together 1 or 2 more good games. Then we're going to go with Keon Coleman in the late second group. I don't know what to say about this guy. Like, I didn't like him as a prospect. He freaks me out a little bit because, you know, he'll do weird things like get benched for 2 drives for being late. And then he'll come in and he'll catch a touchdown. His targets per out run is not good. His yards per out run as a result, also not very good. PFF grade, actually pretty fine. He was mostly a full-time player in weeks 1 and 2, and then he had to sit out part of the game in week 3 because he was late for something, and then the Bills were blowing out the Jaguars by the time he got into the game, basically, so they didn't really need to throw very much. So it's just hard to say with all the blowout wins, with him getting adjusted to this offense, but he plays with Josh Allen. They don't have any established, dominant target earners. Dalton Kincaid certainly hasn't stepped up yet to be that guy. So there is a void here where someone could step up. And he plays a role that none of the other wide receivers on this team can actually play well. Like, he's competing with Matt Collins and Marquez Valdes-Scantling for the down the field type of stuff. So he should be able to take on that role. I think he can do it. And so I keep him here in this early 2 range. And the last guy in this group would be Michael Penix, who, like Jonathan Brooks, we just haven't seen anything from. We know he's a top 10 pick who's probably going to step into a pretty strong situation in Atlanta, pretty stable situation, decent weapons, right? I think decent coaches. Jury's still out on that. Cousins looks better the last couple weeks, but he's still a pretty fragile asset as a 36-year-old quarterback coming off of this major injury. So I just think that there's a lot of ways for Penix to get into the game. I think there's a lot of ways for him to gain value over the next year or so. All right, we'll close this out with 6 rookies that I think are worth a base second round pick. And I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. And I'm going to put them in the order I have them ranked, but I'm not too picky about how you want to order these guys. But the guy that I have first is Trey Benson. He was an early second round pick for me when I thought there was maybe some chance that James Conner was getting up there in age and they actually wanted to go ahead and replace him or platoon him right away. That didn't end up being the case, but this is still a good situation for Benson. I think he still has some exciting traits, and he should have a chance sooner than later to take over this backfield. James Conner is a free agent after the season, so we could see Trey Benson as the starting running back for the Cardinals as soon as next year. And then right after Benson is going to be Braylon Allen, who has arguably been the best rookie running back so far this season. I can't say that that's what I expected, but he's an extremely young player. He's averaged over 5 yards a carry so far on his 19 rushes. He actually has added a couple of receptions in every game this year. He caught a touchdown. He ran a touchdown in. The Jets are just producing so many expected fantasy points for running backs right now that you can actually flex Braylon Allen with a decent amount of confidence. And more importantly, I mean, he's one of the premier handcuffs in the NFL already. Like if something were to happen to Breece Hall, Braylon Allen would arguably be a top 5 running back rest of season. So that in and of itself is probably worth a second. But when you factor in that you are getting a very, very young running back who is going to be in the league probably for a long time, I just think that there's enough meat on the bone there that I would toss out a second for Braylon Allen. And then we're going to get to a few wide receivers here. We're going to have Xavier Legette, Adonai Mitchell, and Ricky Pearsall. With Legette and Pearsall, we're just kind of playing the draft capital game, right? They're both first round wide receivers. That matters when you're 3 weeks into somebody's NFL career. But Legette also does have some opportunity on the horizon for him. Adam Thielen just went on the IR. Andy Dalton is now the quarterback. The passing game should all get a boost. So we should see in the next few weeks here what Legette is made of. I do think that he's capable. I drafted a lot of him in best ball. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we're actually going to feel better about Legette in a few weeks. But it's also possible that he can't beat out Jonathan Mingo for targets and then he's mostly dead. So, high risk, high reward with Legette, but I'm willing to send out a second right now for him and just kind of roll the dice. And then with Mitchell, Adonai Mitchell, he's just kind of off to a brutal start. He only ran 2 routes this past week with Josh Downs back in the lineup. So he's been like utterly phased out. I don't actually know how that's possible. Like I thought that was a typo when I saw it. JJ Zachariason tweeted it out. 2 routes for AD Mitchell. I don't know what his role is going to be moving forward, but he still had that draft capital behind him. I thought he looked good in week 1, could have had 2 deep touchdowns. His targets per out run has been fine. Like he's been drawing targets at a decent rate. 0.23 targets per out run. It's just that there's been so few pass attempts in this offense, and then the pass attempts from Richardson have been very inaccurate. So I don't know how soon that's getting better, but again, I do have him valued here as a second, along with Ricky Pearsall, who we haven't seen yet. It's actually a shame that Pearsall's been injured this whole time when so many of the other 49ers weapons have been out. We could have really seen him come in and maybe make an impact. But instead, we got the 40-point game from Juwan Jennings, which did win me a couple of matchups. So I'm not going to complain about that. But with Pearsall, it's just as simple as good offense plus first round draft capital. That to me is worth a second round pick. And then finally, the last player I've moved up into this group is Bucky Irving, who has looked like the best running back on the Buccaneers by quite a wide margin. I think this pretty much sums it up. We have this tweet from Ian Hartitz. Most yards per carry among 34 running backs with 25 plus carries this season. Bucky Irving ranks second at 6.2 yards per carry. Rashad White ranks 33rd at 2.1. And comparing 2 running backs is rarely as simple as just looking at their yards per carry. But in this case, it genuinely is that simple. When you watch them play, Rashad White looks like he is running in quicksand, and Bucky Irving looks genuinely elusive. He's making big plays. The coaching staff knows it. They are getting him more involved each and every week. He has had a larger and larger share of the running back rushes in 3 consecutive weeks, actually got over 50% in week 3. So I think within a week or two, we are viewing this backfield completely differently. And Bucky Irving is actually the starter with Rashad White as more of a pass catching specialist. And if you want to see where I have the rest of the 2024 rookies ranked, or where I have other players in these same value tiers, you can become a YouTube member for $5.99 a month. You hit the join button down below. You get access to my Dynasty rankings, which are updated weekly at this point. You also get access to my weekly live streams that I'm doing where I cover topics I don't get into in these main videos. And you get access to the members chat in Discord where I'm always answering questions. I'm always talking Dynasty. So it's a great community in there. It's a great way to support my work here on the channel if you want to consider becoming a YouTube member. Otherwise, just make sure to subscribe to the channel and go ahead and join the Discord so you can be eligible to win a Fantasy Points Data Suite next Wednesday, October 2nd. That's it for today's video, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.